"Young man, get back here with that motorcycle, or I swear to God I'll turn you into a hood ornament." That was me, sprinting across my driveway barefoot, half a sandwich still in my mouth, watching a greasy teenage stranger mount my Harley like he was born from an exhaust pipe. He twisted the throttle with all the confidence of a YouTube stunt fail, oblivious to the fact that my bike wasn't just a machine, it was bait. The engine didn't even growl before the alarm shrieked. Not just any alarm. A high-frequency, GPS-linked, police priority silent alert, custom-installed after my neighbor's car got jacked last spring. I wasn't losing a $60,000 motorcycle to some suburban spawn with a skateboard tan and vape juice breath. As I bolted toward him, he froze like a raccoon caught with the lid off a trash can. Then, in the most poetic twist of fate I could have asked for, he fell over. Still straddling the Harley. Onto my flower bed. That's when the screaming started, his, not mine. And right behind it came another scream, higher pitched, with the same shrill rage I'd learned to associate with blenders full of metal forks. His mother. Karen. Her real name was something normal, Barbara, maybe, but she introduced herself during our HOA welcome meeting as Karen with a K, not that it matters because I get things done. She lived 2 houses down and ran the HOA like a discount Bond villain. Passive-aggressive newsletters, obsessive yard inspections, and anonymous complaint emails that somehow always sounded like her voice. I'd kept my distance for 6 months. Then her son tried to grand theft auto my Harley, and all bets were off. She came stomping over in flip-flops, a designer sun hat half crushed in her hand like she'd paused her own poolside villainy to investigate the ruckus. "What did you do to my son?" "He tried to steal my motorcycle. He is a child. He is 17 and attempted a felony. He thought it was abandoned. In my driveway." She blinked, as if her brain had to buffer that sentence. Well, how was he supposed to know it wasn't part of the community amenities? What? He thought it was decorative. "Lady, are you seriously telling me you think my Harley-Davidson fat boy is neighborhood landscaping?" Her eyes darted to the ground, where her son was now covered in mulch, whimpering about his ankle. I wasn't buying it. The kid moved fast enough when he saw me chasing him. Plus, he'd kicked my side mirror when he fell. A side mirror that cost more than his mother's fake pearls. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer," she snapped. "And you'll be hearing from the cops," I replied, just as the flashing blue and red lights hit the street. It was almost comical how fast the cruiser showed up. I gave dispatch a friendly heads-up the second the alarm triggered, and apparently Officer Morales had just finished his sandwich too. Solidarity. Karen switched gears faster than the bike ever could. One moment she was playing attack dog mom, the next she was weeping like I'd dragged her son behind the motorcycle. "He's a good boy," she sobbed. "He just got confused. You know how boys are with their testosterone and their curiosity. He tried to hotwire it. It's a phase." He pulled a screwdriver from his hoodie and jammed it into my ignition. She actually clutched her pearls, eyes wide. "That is a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" Officer Morales raised an eyebrow and pointed at the ring cam above my garage. Karen turned paler than skim milk. "Let's take a moment here. I don't hate teenagers. I used to be one. I made some dumb decisions. But I never tried to steal anything on wheels, especially not from someone who literally waved at me every other morning while watering their lawn. I'd seen this kid, Tyler, lurking around before. Gave him the benefit of the doubt. But now that benefit was revoked. Permanently. While the officer started taking statements, Karen whispered to her son, clearly trying to coach him through a spontaneous case of selective amnesia. It didn't work. The footage showed everything. Tyler circling the driveway, checking if I was home, then making a beeline for the bike like it was Black Friday at Best Buy. They didn't arrest him, not right away. First offense, minor, and Karen promised to handle it internally. Morales gave me a look that said good luck with that. Then he handed me the case number and said if I wanted to press charges, I could. I said I'd think about it, but really I already knew. I wasn't going to press charges. I was going to make sure this never happened again, by beating them at their own game. The next morning, a handwritten note was taped to my mailbox. We, the undersigned, find your motorcycle to be an eyesore and potential danger to the children of this community. Please remove it from public view within 72 hours to avoid escalation. 5 names were scribbled underneath. The first one, Karen with AK. I laughed out loud. Not a normal chuckle. A full-body laugh that probably startled the neighbor's cat. She wasn't just trying to justify her kid's behavior, she was trying to rewrite the narrative. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the irresponsible motorhead endangering the youth of Rosewood Estates. Fine. She wanted escalation? I had just the thing. I spent the day giving my garage a makeover. I wheeled the Harley inside, cleared space around it, and set up my workbench like a showroom display. I opened the bay door and mounted a vintage sign. Community Safety Exhibit. Anti-theft technology demonstration in progress. I even left a stack of printed flyers explaining motorcycle security and vehicle theft deterrent. Nothing about Tyler. Nothing directly targeting Karen. But the message was clear. She lost her mind. First came the complaint email. Then the HOA citation. Then a surprise inspection for noise violations, even though I hadn't revved the bike once. Each time, I documented everything. Screenshots, recordings, timestamp. I started compiling a folder labeled Karen Fallout. It filled up fast. The irony? All this over a bike I hadn't even ridden in weeks. But here's the thing. I'm not a biker. I'm a security systems consultant. The Harley was a retirement gift to myself. Fully tricked out with tracking, alarms, backup batteries, and yes, a direct line to local law enforcement. I designed it to be unstealable. Because where I work, if something can be stolen, it will be. I didn't expect to be proving that point on my own driveway. So while Karen thought she was waging some HOA holy war against a loud, reckless neighbor, what she was really doing was poking a bear that read bylaws like bedtime stories and had more surveillance tech than a casino. The battle lines were drawn. But she hadn't seen the next twist coming. Honestly, neither had I, until I got a knock on the door and found 2 men in suits holding clipboards, saying they were with the insurance. I raised an eyebrow. Whose? They exchanged a glance. Yours. Apparently there's been a claim filed. Property damage. Motorcycle accident involving a minor. We just need to assess the situation. I blinked. Karen had filed a claim on my insurance, saying her son's ankle injury was the result of my negligently parked motorcycle. And just like that, I realized this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She wasn't backing off. She was doubling down. I invited the insurance reps in with all the warmth of a dentist's waiting room. They stepped over the welcome mat, which now felt like an ironic detail in this circus, and began their survey with clipboards poised like weapons. One of them, a balding guy with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his collar, glanced at the Harley inside my garage, then at the camera mounted above it. The second one asked to see where the accident occurred. I led them to the flower bed, which still bore the faint, flattened outline of a teenage panic flop. So let me get this straight, I said while pointing at the tire tracks that led exactly nowhere. He walked into my yard, got on my bike, tried to steal it, fell over, and now I'm liable for his twisted ankle because I, what? Didn't bubble wrap the driveway. Neither of them looked thrilled to be there. The bald one sighed. We're just following up. She filed a secondary claim alleging unsafe storage of a motor vehicle in a pedestrian-adjacent area. I stared at him for a full second. You mean my driveway? It's an unusual claim, he admitted. You don't say. As they snapped photos and made vague notes, I offered them coffee. They declined. I didn't blame them. If I were in their shoes, I'd want out of this HOA gladiator arena too. But as they left, one of them lingered at the door and glanced at my mailbox. "You might want to double-check your policy," he said carefully. "Some of these communities have weird clauses. Looks like she's digging." He wasn't kidding. That night I combed through my homeowner's insurance and HOA agreement like a lawyer with a vendetta. And there it was, buried on page 14 of the bylaws, in font so small it practically needed a microscope. All visible vehicles not in motion must be registered with the community vehicle log and declared under personal liability indemnity should incidents occur. Translation: if your motorcycle is parked where people can see it and something happens, you could be on the hook, if it's not declared. I'd never heard of that clause before. It wasn't standard. It wasn't even mentioned in the HOA welcome packet. But there it sat, quiet and vicious like a legal landmine. And guess who chaired the HOA subcommittee on legal amendments last year? That's right, Karen. I couldn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, out of sheer irritation. The woman was twisting the rules like balloon animals and hoping I'd pop under pressure. She didn't want money. She wanted dominance. HOA Karen didn't believe in neighbors. She believed in subordinate. And I was screwing up her power structure by being a little too clever, a little too independent, and a lot too unbothered by her threats. So I decided it was time to become a problem. The next morning, I registered the Harley in the vehicle log, along with my backup motorcycle, a Vespa I bought on impulse after watching too many Bond films. I then filed an addendum with the HOA stating both were for educational community security demonstrations, invoking the same loophole Karen had used to host her wine tastings under community enrichment. Oh, and I made sure to include the phrase, available by appointment. Then I took it a step further. I emailed the HOA board requesting time on the monthly agenda for a presentation on youth crime prevention through proximity awareness. The title sounded vague and boring enough to get ignored, until it landed right in front of Karen. She called me 3 hours later. "I don't think your presentation is necessary," she said sweetly, voice laced with that faux civility people use when they're trying to poison your dog but want to seem neighborly. "Of course you don't. But I think the community would benefit. There's been at least one recent attempted vehicle theft, after all." A beat of silence. "I believe that situation has been resolved." "Has it?" I said. "I thought your son was still limping." Click. She hung up. Which meant I was winning. But then came the next escalation. That weekend, I got a letter taped, again, to my mailbox. This time it wasn't anonymous. It was from the Rosewood Youth Accountability Task Force, which sounded like a group of concerned parents but was really just Karen and, I assume, her Pilates buddy Cheryl. It demanded that I cease and desist the harassment and emotional targeting of a minor through public intimidation. The letter claimed that Tyler, her son, was suffering emotionally due to my aggressive surveillance practices, and that my cameras, signs, and community flyers created an unsafe psychological environment for adolescents. It ended by suggesting that if I didn't comply, they'd pursue legal action for emotional endangerment. That's right, emotional endangerment, because I owned security cameras and parked a motorcycle in my driveway. I laughed so hard I choked on my cereal, but laughter didn't mean I underestimated her. Karen was playing a war of attrition. Each new move wasn't meant to win, it was meant to wear me down. Death by 1,000 paper cut. The problem was, she'd picked the wrong guy to paper cut. I thrive in bureaucracy. I've trained government agencies on security compliance. I once spent 6 months dismantling a data breach just by weaponizing paperwork. This was foreplay. I drafted a 10-page counter letter citing specific bylaws, federal surveillance laws, and HOA clause contradictions. I included a notarized affidavit from Officer Morales confirming the attempted theft. I even added an invitation for Karen to attend the next neighborhood safety presentation, which, by the way, I'd now scheduled for the clubhouse with donuts and free coffee. No one can resist free donut. 3 days later, I noticed something strange. Tyler hadn't been seen outside. The usual buzz of his skateboard grinding curbs or vaping behind the fence had gone silent. I figured maybe Karen had grounded him. But then a different kind of rumor started floating around. From Linda next door, I heard Tyler might have been expelled. From Greg across the street, police came by their house at night last week. Not sure what for. From Cheryl, yes, that's Cheryl, muttering as she walked past my lawn. Hope you're happy. Kids make mistakes. Adults escalate. I did some quiet digging. Turns out Karen had filed a school complaint, trying to suppress the video footage I'd submitted to the police. It backfired. The school board reviewed the tape independently, flagged it as a serious conduct violation, and Tyler was temporarily suspended pending a hearing. Karen had tried to hide the incident. She ended up broadcasting it. Now the neighborhood was split. Some folks started quietly thanking me. Others avoided eye contact like I was radioactive. Karen, meanwhile, doubled down again. She hosted a youth forgiveness circle at her house, a passive-aggressive garden party designed to reframe her son as a victim of social cruelty. Lawn signs went up. Kids deserve grace, stop weaponizing mistakes, and my personal favorite, accountability shouldn't equal exile. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't need to, because the biggest twist was still coming. The courtroom smelled like desperation and printer ink. Karen sat across from me, decked out in her Sunday best. A pastel blazer, matching pearls, and an expression that blended martyrdom and menace. Tyler sat beside her, looking like a disgraced altar boy forced into a tie. His foot, miraculously healed, tapped nervously against the floor. I half expected him to ask the judge for a juice box. My attorney, Morgan, was the kind of woman who smiled like she had access to your browser history. Sharp, composed, and not even slightly amused by Karen's antics. She had already read the affidavit 3 times and was now flipping casually through Karen's filing like she was browsing a dinner menu. "This reads like a bad HOA-themed soap opera," she whispered. "Is this woman for real?" "Unfortunately," I replied, "yes. But she always overplays her hand." The hearing wasn't a full trial, just a motion to determine whether Karen's injunction request had enough merit to move forward. If the judge bought her claims, I'd be forced to comply with her demands until a full hearing weeks later. Which meant no cameras, no motorcycle displays, no talking to her or Tyler. Essentially, I'd be muzzled in my own home. Karen's lawyer began with all the practiced indignation of someone who gets paid hourly to pretend indignation is a legal argument. He called me obsessive, intimidating, and a self-appointed enforcer of vigilante justice. He described my Harley as a weapon of psychological terror. I nearly choked on my coffee. When it was Morgan's turn, she stood and calmly laid out a case so airtight you could have vacuum-sealed meat in it. Footage of the attempted theft. Photos of Tyler holding a screwdriver near the ignition. HOA documents showing I was in full compliance. Statements from neighbors confirming the timeline. And the cherry on top, a recording of Karen's voice, lifted clean from my Ring cam, threatening legal action before the incident even made it to the police. Morgan turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, if anyone here is attempting to manipulate public perception, it's not my client. It's the woman trying to retroactively redefine theft as a misunderstanding." Karen's face tightened like a drum. The judge leaned back, hands steepled. "I'm not seeing evidence of harassment. I'm seeing a neighbor protecting his property." The court denies the motion for injunction. Boom. Karen didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just sat there, still and silent, the way people get when they realize they've backed themselves into a corner with no exit but through. Outside the courthouse, Morgan packed her briefcase. "This woman's tenacity is either admirable or pathological," she muttered. "She's not finished," I said. "She just lost the legal angle. That means she's going to come at me sideways now." And she did. Oh, did she ever? The very next morning, 3 letters appeared taped to my garage, my front door, and, bizarrely, my trash can. Each one was signed "Concerned Neighbors of Rosewood Estates," and included a list of infractions I was allegedly guilty of: noise pollution, intimidating yard signage, unauthorized surveillance, reckless endangerment. My favorite? Maintaining an atmosphere of neighborhood hostility through the provocative placement of motor vehicles. I checked with the HOA board. No such complaints had been officially filed. These weren't citations. They were theater. Karen was staging a propaganda campaign. But the real twist came that weekend. I was hosting my third community safety workshop, now a popular excuse for me to explain things like motion sensor lighting and garage door reinforcements to retirees looking for an afternoon donut. I was halfway through explaining how to reinforce shed doors with rebar when Greg from across the street raised a hesitant hand. "Hey, you hear about the new HOA resolution?" I froze. "What resolution?" "Apparently there's a motion being fast-tracked to ban outdoor storage of non-utility recreational vehicles within line of sight from any public or private pedestrian access point. Goes up for vote Monday." "Which means motorcycles," I said flatly. "Yup. And it was introduced by?" He winced. "Karen." I ended the presentation early. The next 48 hours were a blur. I studied the HOA's charter, cross-referenced the subcommittee voting protocol, and compiled a list of all residents who'd previously voted against restrictive HOA measures. I printed flyers, plain, professional, factual. No finger-pointing. Just a breakdown of what the rule really meant. I went door to door. Not to argue. Just to explain. The vote on Monday night was tense. We met in the community clubhouse, a painfully beige building that smelled like dusty cookies and old perfume. Karen stood by the snack table, all smiles, as if she hadn't just tried to legally exile me from my own driveway. Cheryl stood behind her like a backup singer. When the motion was read aloud, Karen took the floor. "This is about safety," she said. "And aesthetics. We're a family community. Recreational vehicles in open view send the wrong message. They invite the wrong kind of attention." Wrong kind of attention. There it was. Her whole campaign boiled down to coded fear. Then I stood. Calm. Direct. "My motorcycle is registered, insured, locked in place, and has literally prevented a theft. But let's talk about what this rule actually does. It won't stop crime. It won't beautify the neighborhood. What it will do is punish homeowners for owning legal property they've invested in. You might think it's just a motorcycle now, but what's next? Bicycles? Boats? Lawn chairs?" A few heads nodded. Punitive rules don't build safety. They build resentment. The vote passed by a margin of 3. Karen beamed like she'd just been elected mayor. She walked out flanked by 2 yes voters, all pats on the back and concerned glances in my direction. I stayed behind, quiet, counting. Because I wasn't worried about the vote. I was waiting for the paperwork. The new rule gave owners 30 days to comply. After that, citations would be issued, fines, even legal escalation. But here's the catch. The clause only applied to outdoor recreational vehicles. And mine was now inside my garage, behind new glass panel doors, technically still visible, but behind structural material, which triggered an exemption in the old bylaws Karen hadn't bothered to repeal. When the compliance officer came by, he looked tired. "I hate this job." "Tell me about it," I said. "But you can see, I'm within code." He snapped a few photos, nodded, and left. Karen was livid. She tried to have the exemption repealed. Tried to push a clause that visibility through transparent garage doors counted as outdoor. But this time, the board wasn't biting. Too many residents were tired of the drama. Her influence was slipping. And then came the absolute kicker. A knock on my door. Officer Morales, holding a manila folder. "Mind if I step in?" he asked. "Got an update you'll want to hear." Turns out, the school board had finished its review of Tyler's behavior. Not just the theft. He'd apparently been caught vandalizing another student's locker, bragging about getting away with wrecking some old dude's ride, and even sharing the ring cam footage like it was a highlight reel. The board had expelled him. Not suspended. Expelled. I stared at the email from the reporter, blinking slowly like maybe if I didn't move, it would vanish. But there it was. Subject line: Request for interview, Rosewood Estates HOA incident. The body of the email was polite, professional, and unmistakably probing. The reporter claimed they were working on a local interest story about the dangers of oversurveillance and neighborly conflict in gated communities, and wanted my side of the story. Which meant Karen had already given hers. I didn't respond right away. I didn't panic either. That's not my style. I closed the email, opened a blank notepad, and started writing down everything I already knew. The timeline, the footage, the citations, the legal threats, the injunction denial, Tyler's expulsion. All of it in clean bullet points. Because if I was about to be dragged into a PR war, I was going in armed. That afternoon, I walked 2 blocks over to Linda's house, the unofficial neighborhood gossip hub, and, as luck would have it, someone who'd quietly thanked me weeks ago for the safety workshop. Her curtains were always twitching, and her memory was sharper than Google's search engine. "Oh, I heard," she said before I even knocked. "Karen thinks she's going to be famous." She was practically dancing when the camera crew came to her house. "Camera crew?" She nodded, sipping what I assumed was either iced tea or liquid judgment. News Channel 8. They filmed her on her porch, crying about how her son is being persecuted by authoritarian paranoia. I think she practiced the lines. She was wearing lipstick and pearls, at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. So that confirmed it. Karen had gone full crisis PR. And me? I was apparently the villain in her neighborhood tragedy. The unhinged, motorcycle-loving, camera-wielding menace who had traumatized her poor innocent boy into criminal behavior. That night the story aired. I didn't even have to watch it myself. 6 different neighbors sent me clips, screenshots, and one long text chain full of incredulous emojis. Karen was front and center, framed by potted hydrangeas and moral outrage. She talked about Tyler's bright future, how a single mistake had been twisted into a criminal act, and how one neighbor's obsession with punishment turned a misunderstanding into a community catastrophe. The footage even showed Tyler sitting on the porch steps, looking at the camera with big sad eyes like he was auditioning for a Hallmark special. They never used my name, but they showed my house, my driveway, blurred the license plate but kept the Harley visible in the background. The implication was clear. That was the final straw. I called the reporter the next morning. She was surprisingly receptive. Said she had a feeling there was more to the story, and was happy to come by for a follow-up interview. I agreed. But I didn't just want to sit on camera and whine. I had a better idea. The next day I invited her, and the cameraman, into my garage. The camera rolled as I gave her the tour. The security systems, the camera placements, the ring footage on a monitor, the neighborhood safety flyers. I even pulled out the court documents, redacted, clean, and legally safe to show on camera, and explained exactly what happened. Not with rage, not with smugness, just calm, professional, and surgical. Then I told her the real story. Not just about the bike or the kid, but about the campaign that followed. The fake citations, the mailbox threats, the injunction attempt, the vote to ban vehicles, and finally the tip-off to the media. She looked stunned by the time I finished. "Did you ever confront her directly?" "No need," I said. "I prefer letting people dig their own holes." The segment aired 2 days later under the title, HOA or Vendetta? When Neighborhood Disputes Turn Personal. It showed both sides, but the contrast was sharp. Karen's dramatics didn't play as well when followed by footage of her son actively trying to hotwire a motorcycle. The reaction was swift. Online forums lit up. People started commenting on the original piece, questioning the narrative. Some called out Karen's crocodile tears. Others compared her to Dolores Umbridge with a lawn. And then, as if summoned by the backlash, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. When I showed up to the clubhouse, the air was thick with tension and Costco brand cookies. Karen wasn't smiling anymore. She sat at the edge of her folding chair, lips thin, arms crossed like she was daring someone to speak first. Cheryl sat beside her, whispering like a stage mom at a school play. The rest of the board members looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The president, a soft-spoken guy named Craig who usually stayed neutral on everything from lawn gnome placement to fence paint color, stood up and cleared his throat. "We need to discuss the recent media coverage." Karen immediately launched into a monologue about misinformation, personal vendettas, and how she was being bullied by a man with too much time and too many cameras. Craig raised a hand. "Karen, please. We're not here to litigate the story. We're here to talk about optics." That shut her up. What followed was something I hadn't expected. The board didn't side with me exactly, but they made it clear that Karen had gone too far. They voted to suspend her from her subcommittee positions pending review. The Youth Accountability Group? Disbanded. The vehicle ban motion? Repealed in a second vote. Apparently, several members had felt pressured to vote in favor the first time and wanted it stricken from the record. It was a cleanup job. Quiet, polite, and surgical. No fireworks. No finger-pointing. Just the slow machinery of a bureaucracy trying to protect itself from embarrassment. Karen left the meeting early. The next morning, her "Kids Deserve Grace" sign was gone. So was the porch furniture. So was Tyler. I found out from Linda, of course, that she'd enrolled him in an online prep school in another county. Word was she was temporarily relocating, to stay with her sister for a while. No one asked when she'd be back. But I wasn't done yet. Because while Karen was busy playing PR victim and martyr in exile, I'd quietly been speaking with another neighbor, one who worked in real estate. She mentioned something strange. Karen didn't technically own the house. It was in her ex-husband's name, held in a trust, and leased to her under a private agreement. Which meant that all those HOA positions, the ones requiring ownership status, she hadn't been eligible for any of them. I didn't even need to do anything. Once the board got wind of that little fact, her entire tenure as an HOA authority was invalidated retroactively. All her motions, her rule changes, her subcommittee claims, they were now just noise. Legally meaningless. Craig showed up at my door a week later to hand me a letter. A formal apology from the HOA board for the unwarranted targeting and misuse of authority I had endured. Attached was a gift card to a local steakhouse and a waiver for my next year's HOA fees. I accepted the waiver. The steakhouse gift card I mailed anonymously to Officer Morales with a note, "Thanks for always answering the call." Spring came quietly to Rosewood Estates, the kind of season that normally slipped by unnoticed unless your HOA mandated a floral display. This year, though, it felt like an exhale. The bushes were trimmed, the sidewalks swept, and for the first time in months, no flyers were taped to my mailbox. The Karen saga had ended not with a bang but a sputter, like a leaf blower running out of gas. She'd vanished like a bad rumor, leaving behind a legacy of awkward glances and repainted fences. I'd almost started to forget what the chaos felt like. Almost. It was a Tuesday when the doorbell rang. I was adjusting the new security cam angle on my garage monitor when I caught the silhouette. A man in a polo shirt and khakis, holding a clipboard. My first thought? Another inspector. But when I opened the door, the guy smiled like he'd been trained by Disney. "Hi there. You must be the guy with the motorcycle." My jaw tightened slightly. "Depends who's asking." He extended a hand. "Name's Jared. I'm with Ridgewell Realty Group. I'm actually representing a prospective buyer who's interested in this neighborhood, and your name came up." "Did it now?" "Yeah, seems your garage security setup caught his eye. He works in tech. Big on home integration. He'd love to take a peek if you're open." It was strange. Friendly, yes. But strange. No one ever came to Rosewood Estates to buy because of security systems. They came for the schools, the landscaping, the promise of tranquility. Still, I played along. Sure, I said. You tell your guy I'll be here Saturday. He wants a tour, I'll give him one. Full breakdown. Live demo. No charge. Jared left, chipper and satisfied, and I went straight to the garage and checked the cameras. 5 minutes before ringing my bell, he'd parked 3 houses down, walked over, snapped a few photos of the driveway, and texted someone. Odd behavior for a realtor, unless he was moonlighting as a private investigator. That night, I pulled out Karen's old HOA newsletters from the Fallout folder. Sure enough, Ridgewell Realty was listed as the preferred agent during her term. I did a bit of digging and found a few posts from local forums where Ridgewell's name came up, mostly involving properties tied up in divorce settlements, trust disputes, and HOA power plays. I wasn't dealing with a random tech enthusiast. I was dealing with a cleanup operation. Karen wasn't just hiding at her sister's. She was trying to sell her influence before the cement dried on her legacy. She was quietly shopping her story, her position, maybe even trying to install someone else who could pick up where she left off. Saturday arrived. So did Jared. This time, he brought his client, a thin, tightly wound man in his 40s with expensive shoes and an aura that screamed CEO of something that ruins your weekend. He introduced himself as Dane. No last name. Impressive setup, Dane said, glancing at my garage. You designed this yourself? I gave him the rundown. How every camera was integrated into a single panel. How the door sensors work. How the Harley could alert the police without ever making a sound. He nodded, mildly impressed. Then he cut to the point. You know, there's a lot of potential here, he said. These kinds of communities are ripe for modernization. New boards. Smarter governance. People like you could do well with the right backers. I blinked. Backers. He smiled like a poker player laying down a winning hand. Karen might have been abrasive, but she wasn't wrong about everything. This place needs structure. Needs a vision. We're looking to pick up a few properties and reshape the board. There it was. The soft pitch. The handover. He didn't want to buy my house. He wanted to buy me. So what's in it for me? I asked just to hear it. Board position. Influence. Maybe even a consulting stipend. You've already got half the neighborhood listening to you. And the other half hates my guts. They'll come around. I leaned against the workbench. So let me guess. You smooth things over. Maybe rebrand the HOA. Bring in some new rules. Quietly reinstate the ones Karen pushed. But with a cleaner image. His smile thinned. Something like that. And all I have to do is play ball. Exactly. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Get out." He didn't move right away. Thought maybe I was joking. I wasn't. This isn't a startup pitch. This is a neighborhood. And whatever Karen told you about me, she forgot the most important thing. I don't care about power. Care about peace. You can't buy that. And you sure as hell can't sell it. Dane left without another word. Jared didn't even make eye contact. I watched their SUV pull away, then shut the garage door. So, that's where we were now. Karen was still pulling strings from a distance, trying to re-establish control without showing her face. The media spin hadn't worked. The legal route had failed. So she'd turned to franchising her delusion, hoping someone else could finish what she started. And the neighborhood? It had changed. Neighbors who once kept their heads down now stopped me on walks. Some asked about cameras. Others thanked me for standing up. Linda even baked me a pie, which I politely accepted and not so politely fed to the raccoons because I don't eat anything that comes with gossip frosting. Craig, the HOA president, started coming to me before meetings. Not to scheme, just to ask if I saw any red flags. He called it neighborhood health checks. I called it cautious optimism. For the first time, Rosewood Estates felt like a place without a dictator. And yet, something still gnawed at me. Because people like Karen don't just disappear. They adapt. They fester. They wait for a lapse in attention. So I made a decision. At the next board meeting, during open comments, I stood up and said 5 words that turned every head in the room. I'd like to run. There was a pause. Then murmurs. Then Craig asked, run for what? Board chair, I said. Next term. Karen's old seat. Gasps from the audience. Cheryl visibly choked on her lemon water. Craig blinked. You're serious? As a tracking chip in a teenager's hoodie. And I meant it. Not because I wanted power, but because I'd seen what happened when no one paid attention. Karen hadn't started as a villain. She'd started as a bored suburbanite with too much time and not enough resistance. The next Karen was out there. Maybe quieter. Maybe smarter. But always waiting for the neighborhood to fall asleep again. So I ran. And I won. The next few months were the most boring of my life. Budget meetings. Lawn debates. PowerPoint presentations on street lamp wattage. But the neighborhood stayed quiet. Peaceful. Reasonable. Because that's what people forget. Revenge stories don't end when the villain loses. They end when no one like them can rise again. So now, I still sip coffee in my garage, still listen to the hum of calm streets, still polish the Harley once a week. But there's a new sign above the tool bench now. Small. Brass. Etched in simple letters. No kings. No Karens. Just neighbors. And maybe one guy with a few too many cameras.